All right, so our topic is about control. Hey, Lance, go to the next slide.
So we have our introduction to control. Control ensures that business activities align with organized goals, and it helps businesses achieve efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability. The importance of control is that it helps organizations stay on track towards objectives. It ensures accountability among employees and managers, and it also identifies opportunities for improvement and increases efficiency. There are four steps to control process. The first step is to establish standards, which define measurable goals. Step two is to measure performance. With this, you collect data to assess progress. Step three is to compare performance with standards. This is how you identify performance gaps. And step four, you take corrective action, which adjusts strategies when needed. There are also three types of control. We have B4 control, which prevents problems before they occur. You have concurrent control, which monitors activities in real time. And you have feedback control, which evaluates the results after the fact. Control is a continuous process, and when used effectively, control systems lead to better decision making and long term success. So, next, we'll be talking about standards. So, exactly what are standards? These are performance expectations or benchmarks used to measure success, basis for evaluating organizational teams or individual process performance. There are a couple of characteristics of effective standards. Specific is one of them, which is clearly defined and measurable. Challenging but achievable is one, and it encourages improvement without being unrealistic. Relevant is also one, so it just ties to the business goals and strategies. And then timely is also one. That is monitored regularly for adjustments. And there are also four different types of standards. The first one is going to be financial standards, which focus on revenue targets and profit margins. The second one is going to be quality standards, which focus on defect rates and customer satisfaction scores. The third one is going to be productivity standards, which focuses on the units produced per hour and also the service speed. And then the last one is going to be behavioral standards, which are going to include employee conduct and the ethical compliance. There are some roles that standards play in the control process, and there are four steps to that as well. The first step is just to set the standards and define clear expectations. Second step is measurable performance, so to collect data on the actual performance. Step three is to compare with standards, so just identify the gaps between expected and actual results. And then step four is to take corrective action. So this just adjusts the strategies if the standards are not met. There are very many importance of standards, and these are just going to be a few. They help maintain consistency and efficiency. They help to ensure accountability and goal alignment. And then they drive the continuous improvement of the organization. So just a little recap for like the role of importance of standards and how standards contribute to organizational success. And if you guys have any questions, do not be afraid to ask.
So the next step in the control process is comparing actual performance to performance standards. This depends heavily on the information systems as well as the measurements that company or organization uses. Importance of performance standards. This helps companies track progress and identify problems. Also, it can help decision making as well as operational efficiency. And in the textbook's case in forestry, maintaining standards is crucial to prevent economic and environmental loss. Sveaskog's AB's challenge. Sveaskog AB is Sweden's largest forestry company, which manages 9.6 million acres of forest. Their challenge is they detect and remove infected trees from European spruce bark beetles, which have the potential to be more destructive than forest fires. They threaten 15% of Sweden's annual logging production with a potential economic loss of $600 million per year. Geo Satellite Intelligence Solution, GSI. Svekog partnered with Sogatai, which is a leading technology provider, to use GSI, which allowed them to create detailed map tracking to see beetle movements. They use drones to verify affected areas with accurate results. Detecting early enough will allow them to stop further spread. Impact and benefits. It allows for faster response times to identify and remove infected trees. It prevents large-scale destruction in Sweden's forests. It provides cost savings and sustainability for the forestry industry. And finally, these solutions enhance efficiency and environmental protection because they are technology driven.
So next up, we have a corrective action. That's a key step in control process. It's 5 steps which you're in a corrective action, starting from identifying the problem. So let's say we have a bank during the COVID, and they noticed 30% decline in branch visits. Uh, After that, it comes analyzing the cause. They analyzed customers' behavior and found out that 85% they have 85% customers increase in use of mobile banking. Uh, After that, they have to develop a solution, and so they decided to enhance mobile banking. They added visual advisors and other security measures. After that, they implement solution. Solution was to close underperforming branches and redirect all resources to online or mobile banking. And last step, monitoring results. They tracked down customer satisfaction, and they saw continued growth of mobile and online banking.
So next we have the dynamic cybernetic process. And in this one, we kind of just take the definition of control and how control is a continuous and dynamic process, which means it's always happening and it's always changing. From a manager's perspective, a manager can be thinking about the control of what they're managing from years, months, weeks, and days in advance. And this process begins by setting standards, following said standards, and then evaluating deviations. In this, control from managers is cybernetic. And what that buzzword means is it's the process of steering and keeping whatever you manage on course. And so I took this from the textbook. This is Exhibit 16.1, and it just shows the exact process of setting standards and following through and the entire cybernetic control process. So at first, you see that we set standards, and then after that, we measure performance. From there, we'll compare with those previous set standards, and then we'll identify deviations. From there, we'll analyze said deviations, and then develop and implement programs for corrective action. And from there, you'll go back to measuring performance. So as you can see from this diagram, this process is never ending and it should always be happening. It's the manager's job to constantly evolve this process and keep it changing. And I think a perfect example of this is when I was reading the textbook, I thought of how McDonald's, the fast food chain, began because it started with two brothers who originally had an idea for a very highly efficient fast food chain, but they didn't quite know how to achieve it based on the current models of car hops. So what they did was they went out with their staff that they had at the time, and they went through different diagrams and different drawings and different blueprints of what they can do to make their job more efficient and make the food process way quicker. And inevitably, they found a model that worked for them that revolutionized the fast food game. And then from there, they're constantly still evolving, adding even more, even more tools in the system that will make their job easier. So I think that's a perfect example of the cybernetic control process and how dynamic and it can be.
All right. I'm doing the different types of controls, which is feedback, concurrent, and feed forward control. So feedback control is essentially the type of control where after an event occurs, you can figure out ways to prevent it in the future. So for instance, like the example I have under it, they got black boxes in planes, and the idea behind a black box in planes is that they can figure out and determine what happened before these certain planes, helicopters, etc. crash. While these are good ways of prevention, sadly it's after the fact, and I mean essentially you definitely want to try to find ways to stop these issues before that. And then next is concurrent control, which is essentially a form of control where right as something is happening, you can figure out on how to prevent it and stop it. So the book gives an idea of water sensors to detect leaks. And the idea behind this is while it is still leaking, you find it very early so that it might not turn into a full bursted pipe, which can cause more issues down the line. Again, while this is a better version, there is still a problem initially happening. That leads us to feed forward control, and this is the idea of preventing it before the problem even happens. So for instance, I'm using the example of GPS. Sometimes when you're driving on a long drive, your GPS will tell you that you're going to hit traffic in 40 miles, and they'll give you a different route to save you 10 minutes. That's the idea behind it, so that it saves you from hitting the traffic before it happens, so it can minimize and prevent what's the inevitable. So to overall sum it up, all three of these are very important because sometimes there's not an opportunity to have feed word control. And all these types of controls are eventually ways in order to fix things so that things won't happen in the future. So, um, I think this was meant to be the second slide. Go to the next one. Perfect. Control is not always possible. So this is my this is my second topic. The first start the chapter talks about control loss, and that's basically just the idea of production that loses a company money. Then you talk about regulation cost, and this really kind of sums up that control is not always possible because there are some times where, because of cost of what control does, it doesn't make financial sense for a company. So, for instance, in the book states the example of recycling. And recycling in Florida, or just in general, a lot of recycling isn't necessarily possible, and they only can use a small amount of it, and it costs more to recycle than it would be to just produce a new product. So it's not a very lucrative industry. So some places in Florida are not using it anymore. All right, if you guys have any questions, we definitely be here to answer. Thank you.